Hey everybody, welcome back to East Oak Studio. As always, a few glitches in the system, but we're up and live and ready to go. So we're so happy to have the lovely Samantha with us today. And I don't know if y'all can see her with that camera angle, but we have had several requests to make sure that even though you have the live model photo references, that several people are like, but we really don't know if you're painting from life. So I decided that I'd give you one wide angle so that you would get to see that Samantha's up there while we're painting her from life. And we're super excited about doing another East Oak Studio painting from life session with Alex and Lewis. Please give your comments, questions. We love to answer questions. And if there's a conversation starter of some sort that you want to bring in, or something that deals with the art realm, we would love to talk about it on air. So without further ado, we're going to get started right now. And on the next break, I will give y'all a few announcements. But if y'all enjoy watching these things, make sure you like and subscribe. That's how other people like you will find and discover our channel. And we deeply appreciate it. And now we're going to get started. Okay, let me get you one thing. I had the cap on Alex's. Was my way of getting ahead.
Yeah,
I was like, no one knows that I'm in competition with you if they can't see your painting.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Well, we really appreciate you. If y'all are, tuning in from somewhere in the world, which would be 100% of you. Unless somebody on like one of the space stations are watching this, that would be pretty cool too. But make sure to say hi, tell us where you're from, give you a shout out. Oh man, so I'm going to try again, similar to what I did last time, which is a little bit of a limited palette. And which is going to be fun because if I'm going to use the same colors as I did last time, but we have a much richer, darker skin this time. So it'd be fun to see how you use the same colors but go lower in value and lower in, or kind of sometimes higher in chroma, you know?
Yeah.
Darker skin's so much more fun in some ways because you get to work with more range of chroma. Now, Miss Samantha is a photographer and a creative in her own right, and we'll make sure to put her Instagram down at the bottom of our video sometime or another. Hold on just a moment. Yep. We had gotten a notice that somebody was saying that y'all couldn't access it, but it sounds like that now people can see it. So thankfully we have somebody. I'll somewhere else watching it and informing us of those things. So if anything goes wrong, always send us a text or send us an email saying something's gone wrong. Otherwise, sometimes we don't know. So we appreciate that. All right, where was the brush I was using? Did you steal it? Alex? Telling you, man, you got to watch out for this kid. He's a sneaky guy.
Gotta watch out for the quiet ones.
That's right. You never know what's going to happen there.
Chris Barraclough is tuning in from Manchester, England.
Man, I'd love to get my way over there. As soon as all this mess is over, I would love to get my way back over to Europe. I had a workshop planned last year in Italy, and it got canceled, obviously, due to everything. It's a really sad day. So hopefully I'll get that workshop back again. Maybe someday I'll get to do one in England. Alex has one in England next year, right? 2022 over at Rosemary?
Yep. June, I think. But that was supposed to be in 2020. And yeah, just kept getting pushed back year after year.
See if I can rotate this a little bit. Let me just make sure these are focused. It's funny when you have you operate kind of as a two-man band. You're wearing a lot of different hats. So if I step off stage, just playing cameraman for a second.
All right, so we have some people tuning in from New Jersey, the Philippines, Florida, my home state, and that's about it so far. Oh, and Los Angeles.
Yeah, I know Florida's a big state, but do you know them?
No.
You know, it's one of those things, it's funny, it's a small world. Every now and again you'll go, oh yeah, we went to school together. Chris and all of us were hanging out recently, and I was talking about some dear friends of mine that I grew up with, and we were on a road trip, and we were literally in the middle of nowhere, you know, probably 8 hours from where we grew up. And we pull into like a Dairy Queen, and the person who's taking their order, he's like, man, I think she sounds familiar. I was like, we're at a drive-thru in a Dairy Queen, man, nine hours away from like where we grew up. How would you know somebody out in Timbuktu? And we drove up, and they were twins, and one of them was like, dude, I think that's like Elizabeth. He's like, oh yeah, Elizabeth from camp back in like, 3 years ago. And they like leaned over the window and like, are you Elizabeth? She was like, yes, I am Elizabeth. Like, we got to get out. And so they get out. And it's one of those things you just never know. Small world. Never know who you're going to run into. Maybe you should just stop painting and start telling stories.
Gail says, hey y'all, listening to Lewis brings my Texas accent back. I know it isn't Texas, from Oregon.
I love it. Well, I'll be here all night, ladies and gentlemen. When I talk about my buddies, they have incredibly strong hometown accents. And so it kind of brings it out in me when I talk about them. Alex, you guys start talking now. I'm gonna get to humming.
We actually have a comment for Alex. Alex Tibet says, "Hello from Los Angeles. I've been addicted to watching you guys. Alex, the sneak peek of your most recent painting is amazing."
Oh, thank you. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Let's see here. So last time I started just doing no drawing. So this time I'm going to do just the opposite. We'll see what happens. I have a feeling that it's going to be way faster. After watching Susan Lyon, we had Susan Lyon here last week, and to watch her do her demo of the model, and she did it in an hour, made me go, gosh, I need to like step up the time game, man.
Yeah, an hour. That's just crazy.
Isn't it something? But we appreciate you tuning in to us sitting here painting. Alex is mesmerizing to watch.
Michelle Brash asks, "Do you approach portraiture the same as landscape and still life? If not, how do you approach it differently?"
I would say, for me, it's pretty much the same. Landscape is just probably just a lot more simplifying because there's so many little shapes. But pretty much the same palette, everything.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, the big thing to break down for me has always been like values and shapes. So just kind of like what Alex said. So with that being said, yes, I try to approach it the same way. The problem, there's different problems though, I think, you know, so with working like on a live model, for example, you have somebody who naturally will sway, and so it's good to have like a good knowledge of anatomy to help and understand three dimensions to like help structure the person into the piece. But then with working on landscape, the light's changing on you quickly. So you're literally chasing light versus chasing dimension. And so that's where the challenge becomes different, you know. But regardless, they are both difficult and challenging to do.
Use this clip. Oh yeah, I'm working on this is an old dye bond panel that I was gonna glue linen onto, and I put the glue on, and then I tried to put the linen on, but it wouldn't stick. So this is literally just dye bond and glue. And I was like, that kind of feels like it'd be nice to paint on. So I scuffed it down, and it seems to be working.
That's kind of awesome.
Dye bond and glue.
So Alex just finished one piece that he did that post about, which was Awesome piece. And he's already started on another one. He started drawing one today. Sometimes I'll get envious because sometimes I have to do some film editing for the next video we have releasing. And I'll look over and I'll be like, oh, he's drawing today.
Another one.
It's kind of like somebody in an office and they're looking outside and it's like a beautiful day. You're like, oh, it would be nice to just be doing construction right now.
Yeah, well, sometimes computer work is a lot easier on the brain. I just did my taxes and it was like a break from painting.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, oh, I can just sit here and look up stuff. That's easy.
Mm. I will say, man, taxes. Some people are gifted for that, man. I'm so glad they are, so I don't have to be.
Gail asks, have you all gone over which colors are on your palettes lately? Would it be too much trouble to go over it again?
No, let's do it. Seems like we're both working with a limited palette, so it should be easy enough. Mine right now is ultramarine blue, asphaltum, which is a Rembrandt color, transparent oxide red, alizarin crimson, yellow ochre, what is this? Permanent yellow medium, and then permalba white, which is like a titanium.
Yeah, I have, this is a Naples Yellow by Michael Harding. I've Lead White by Natural Pigments. And then an alizarin crimson permanent. I think that's with Michael Harding as well. And then that is manganese violet, French ultramarine blue, cobalt blue, Viridian, and transparent oxide red and yellow, raw umber and black. But I'm trying to stay with just raw umber, oxide yellow, and a little bit of these three as sort of complements to these three. So I'm going to stay largely in this range and then go from there, just to kind of create a little bit more color harmony. So, and on the next break, I'm going to move over the background just a little bit so that I have a bit of that gray background, because I didn't think about it, but it's not covering on this side. So,
well, I was literally about to paint the red.
Were you really? You're like,
So how much are you going to move it over?
Well, I can keep it there then.
No,
I can keep it there.
If you want to gray
No, brother,
background, go.
I'm good. If you're going to paint the, you're like, glad you said it now.
But I can stop.
That'd kind of be cool to do one side one, the other side the other. That's kind of neat.
If the form's right, it shouldn't matter what the background is, right?
That's right, yeah. Listen to you.
Got a minute and a half. It's awfully quiet today. I think
think we need some of the people to start chiming in. So what is everyone working on these days? Are y'all able to get out? People been getting vaccinated? And anyone taking any workshops? What's going on in the world? Samantha said that she, I think, is doing some sort of smaller art event tomorrow, I think, with doing some with her photography or something. I can't remember. So we'll have her say something about that in a minute. Well, isn't that a beautiful chime? Yep, you can move. All right, everybody, we're going to take a quick break, and we will be back. All right, we're back again. Hopefully we didn't lose too many people tuning out. And we need to do like really fun, creative commercials and be like, stay tuned after these commercials.
So we actually have a lot of questions coming in, but before I read some, Mazen Gerbal says that he is currently painting with us, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, so I guess I'll go to the first question, just an easy one. Alex, what easel are you using?
Oh, what is it called? I think it's on the name, on the easel. It has the name. Letter easel, L-E-D-E-R, easel. And I'm pretty sure you buy it on Etsy. But it just attaches to your tripod, and it comes with like this tray thing that also attaches to your tripod, so it's super easy. And I actually bought it to use because when I'm painting in the studio, I just put my palette right on this easel like this.
Cool. And while we still have you, Alex says, I recall Alex in one of his workshop videos saying he used to apply an oil ground to a hardboard before he switched to a lead alkyd white ground by Rublev. Any significant differences between the two?
Not really. The lead ground just dries faster, and it's like it's harder to control because you can't sand it because it's lead. Where the oil, like, you can get away with sanding it more, like if you get a undesirable texture or something. But I feel like the end product of the paintings and stuff look the same.
All right. And then Bagel Bread asks, what do you guys think about the Zorn palette?
Bagel bread.
That's an awesome handle on your thing. That's pretty cool. Bagel bread. Are you from New York?
They got some good bagel bread in New York.
They do have some good bagel bread in New York. I kind of miss New York bagel bread. I think I love the Zorn palette. You know, honestly, the Zorn palette is kind of on my palette. It's just I have extra colors. But I've talked about this before. I love working with a limited color palette because of the fact that it actually helps force you to create color harmony without even really trying too hard. So that aspect of it is pretty nice. Yeah, you'd be amazed of the range of color you can create with the Zorn palette. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I constantly want to just switch to the Zorn palette, but then every time I'm like, well, I'll do the Zorn palette, but I can't do without this color. And
Yeah.
I can't do without that color. And then I just end up with my full palette. So I need to just do it because you do get a really nice color harmony.
In fact, was Susan doing the Zorn palette?
She did even less than the Zorn palette. It was just burnt sienna and ultramarine blue and white.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Just no yellow. Yeah.
All right. Michelle Brash asks, Alex, as someone who is teaching myself with the oversight of a master, how do you build a curriculum or decide on a direction for yourself to tackle or learn how to paint different subjects?
Awesome question. I mean, honestly, there's like a few things that it wasn't just a straightforward curriculum. I bounced around a lot, but I would like think about, I mean, you can literally go to a lot of these ateliers, like websites, and look at their lesson plans like throughout the year, and you kind of just get a sense for, okay, they study drawing intensely for a certain amount of time, and then they work, like, they do like cast drawings, and then they do figure drawings, all this stuff, and you can kind of work out a curriculum for yourself. But for me, I kind of just took it, like each painting was basically the beginning of the painting, I was teaching myself drawing, and then, you know, the next stage I was then teaching myself like all the different stuff about painting, and I would just take, you know, watch videos and stuff, and when I would take a workshop, I would just try and implement the things I learned in the workshop. And so I kind of did everything for like each painting. I didn't really stop and like, I'm just going to work on drawing for a month, although I kind of wish I did that. That would be really nice, but I think because I just went from painting to painting, I learned how to make a painting. And, you know, you got to do a lot of, like, have a lot of bad ideas and do a lot of bad paintings before you can do a decent one, so it was definitely good for that. Yeah, I hope that kind of answers the question. But I guess part of the curriculum would be, at least if you can't, once or twice a year if you can, or, you know, every 2 years or something, try and take an in-person workshop from someone you really like admire. And if not, like there's so many videos out now, because watching someone paint is great.
Yep, that is very true.
And Alex, you kind of just answered this one, but for Lewis, Jesse Willicook asks if you could give a young Alex or Lewis advice on how to study painting or drawing most effectively, what would it be?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think Alex did a pretty decent job on that, but I would say that you should also really spend some time with like intentional practice, surrounding yourself with people that you may trust their opinion, and make sure that, you know, you're not just asking anyone. I mean, it is good to get a layman's opinion, but if you want someone that has a little bit of a trained eye, that would be really helpful to have somebody around like that, so that you can really force yourself to have intentional practice. That I have found to be one of the more effective things for me when I was learning to paint. I tried to do it a lot on my own for a very long time. And what I found is, for me, one of the most effective ways is to do really hard things in practicing to the point where your brain hurts. And I feel like some people need a commitment device or a level of accountability to make that happen. And so that's why it's great to be around quality people who want to see you win. And I think that, that goes with anything in life that you're trying to learn. But it does most certainly applies also to painting.
Yeah, another thing I'd add to my answer is also, especially when doing it by yourself, is to put in the same amount of hours as someone who is at a school or working full time, or obviously the best of your ability that you can get as close as you can to putting in that many hours. Because I still had part-time jobs and stuff, so I definitely didn't 100% have the exact hours of a student at an atelier, but I was definitely, treating it like a job.
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest thing. Really, it's so hard to do, especially by yourself. I think just a few people, I think the reason that Alex was so successful is that he was capable of doing it by himself. And I think that's why ateliers exist out there, is because it's literally a level of accountability that helps you get to that stage.
Cool. I have a quick and easy one from David Buckbinder. What type of varnish do you use on your finished paintings? Thanks.
I use multiple different types, but and we have a video out there that you can watch that will help you with figuring out navigating the varnishing world. But I use a form of Gamvar, and typically I'll do that as an outer layer. And the reason I do that as an outer layer is because it is easy to remove, and so it becomes a really good sacrificial layer. But the base layer, I typically make Conservar, which is made by Natural Pigments or Rublev Company. And it is really, really great for a more, to have as a longevity varnish. Every varnish has a different light refraction, so it's going to make your painting look slightly different. And so you've got to practice on on some paintings that you don't like, and just test what you do like to help you find what'll work for you. But in my opinion, those are my favorites, is Conservar, and then I'll put an outer layer of Gamvar on top of that. Conservar takes a odorless mineral spirits or a little bit harsher solvent. Gamvar, all you need is Gamsol to take it off. So that's one of the major differences.
And yeah, I also use either Gamvar or
Gamsol?
no.
Okay, so or Conservar.
Yeah. Usually it's how long it's been drying. So if it's been drying for a really long time, I'll use the Conservar for some reason, and if it hasn't been drying as long, I'll use the Gamvar. I'm not sure why I do that. I'm sure I had a reason at some point, and I forgot it. And then, so yeah, I use both of those. Or it's whatever, if I happen to have one in the studio and don't have to wait for it to come in the mail, I'll just use whatever one, because they're both really good.
All right. Hosh says, you rock. And then our friend Mark Nussbaum says, hi guys, a little behind, but I'm getting set up to join on the painting tonight.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Way to go, Mark. And Alex does rock. Alex has like rock star look about him too. He's got like the long hair, the man bun. Yeah, man.
The rock star look. That's why I do it. That's why I paint. I just want to be a rock
Yeah,
star.
he's a rock star. Yeah. That's what all the cool people do.
Lewis, Gail says, I'm watching Seth Haverkamp's demo next week with Portrait Society. Aren't you up in May?
I'm up in May, and I will be doing a lecture through Portrait Society with. Oh, actually, I will be up in July, if you're talking about Portrait Society. So I will be doing one on skin tone with how to paint effective skin tones with Portrait Society. So Seth's a great person to learn from, though. He's got a lot of knowledge. He knows how to make some really good, pretty color harmonies. So super nice guy too. I've met him once in person, but I was impressed with just his, his character.
That's the son of a gun who beat me at Portrait
That
Society.
is the son of a gun who beat you at Portrait Society. So in May, I will also be, in Portrait Society with as a finalist, which I'm super excited about. Wish it was in person, I feel like, your paintings always look better in person, and you kind of wish that people were able to see them there. But I will also, at the same time as Portrait Society is going on, literally the next day after the award ceremony, I will be teaching a workshop in Scottsdale, Arizona. So shameless plug, there's a couple of spots open, and Scottsdale does scholarship. And so there's a couple of scholarship options, slots for my workshop. It's a portrait workshop for anyone who wants to join. And it's right after the Portrait Society conference online. So I'm literally going to be in Scottsdale watching the portrait conference and being a part of it and participating, and then literally the next day getting up and teaching a portrait workshop. So, but pretty stoked, and I'm going to do something interesting this year. I'm actually going to do 3 one-hour-day lectures pre-workshop, so that the lectures don't eat up the time that we have to paint. So, so everyone who signs up will get some, FaceTime with me to go over the lectures. And that way we can pack in more while we're in person, and yet get all the same content that you normally would, because I always would go over on the lectures, and I'm trying to jam so much information, and then feel like I'm kind of scrambling to finish a demo or to give them time to paint. So this way, since we have the ability to, I was like, I'm going to just do them on camera. So that is something that no other workshop person is offering. So go to Scottsdale's Artist School's website, sign up, fly down, we'll have a good time together. And on top of that, the week before, I'll do 3 online lectures just with y'all. So there's my shameless plug.
Gail says, I was trying to promote the shameless plug. And she also said, have you heard Seth Haverkamp explain how he does it with color blindness?
With color blindness? No, I have not. Which is really interesting to think about, because in fact, I think Susan Lyon talked about this. Did she not, when we were at the workshop, where color blindness is just not necessarily the worst thing, because especially even if you have a limited palette, because you're not fully colorblind, so you still can see like blue and yellow, or depending on which color blindness level that you have. But I found that really interesting and fascinating that she was talking about that, because value is so important, because there's 3 times as many rods in our eyes that see light and dark as there is cones that see the actual color. So because it's so important, you can actually make beautiful paintings without being able to see the full spectrum of color. Which goes into another interesting point, which is we have 3 color receptors in what they call cones in our eyes. And it allows for us to see the spectrum that we can, and we literally use the balance between those 3 to make like millions of colors that our minds can see. But there are some animals out there, one of which is the mantis shrimp, that has like 23 color receptors that see spectrums that go in the ultraviolet and the infrared. So, which is really interesting. And butterflies, several butterflies. Okay, well, that was time, right? Okay. I'll get off my rant about science, and we will see y'all in a second. All right, we're back. So is this our second session? Third? I think third session, right? So basically we'd have 20 more minutes to finish it out to where Susan was.
Yeah, that's just nuts.
Now I will say she didn't take any break. So it was like plowing straight through, but still, I mean, that's crazy. So hats off to you, Susan Lyon.
So weird to think about.
I guess we'll just dive in with our first question. Christopher Bearclaw says, I'd absolutely love to study art abroad. What art school would you recommend to go to in America for learning techniques?
Ooh. Well, there's a lot of them. I would say, I learned some really great things at Grand Central Atelier. I think every school has great things that they teach you, but I don't know if any school teaches you everything you need to know. And so, with that being said, keep in mind that, I think that some schools do stuff that's great in some areas, and other schools do stuff in others. So if you want to learn figure, I would say that Grand Central Atelier is probably one of the better places that I could ever recommend for being trained on how to paint the figure. That's what they mainly focus on there, and I think that they would be quite powerful if you're wanting to learn the figure. They just go over so well with structure, how to see, and so yeah, that's where I would send you. If you're wanting to learn a lot of techniques about color and drawing, I think Jeff Hine probably has a really great program. He's told me about it, and I think that he tends to steer people towards their tendencies that kind of create their own identity, which is kind of a big thing in our world, because it's just so easy to go to a program that doesn't that teaches you certain techniques, and then it sometimes stunts your identity a bit, and then you have to like reclaim the look that is going to be you, that's uniquely you. And I think that's the one fear of getting classically trained somewhere. So Jeff Hine, Great Lakes Academy has some really great stuff going on there with Jeffrey Larson. I think he's an incredible teacher, devotes his heart to his students. I just couldn't put up with the cold. Alex, what do you think, buddy?
Well, that was my problem. I couldn't settle on one, so I didn't go to any. I also couldn't afford any, but yeah, that's hard. I feel like, in my opinion, a lot of really good work is coming out of like Grand Central Atelier, and then I see on their drawings all these structural things that they're like, you know, getting into, and that just seems really important to me. So I would say there. And then for like color and brushwork and stuff, I would just study with different artists, like workshops and stuff.
That's great.
I think they have on the Art Renewal Center website, they have like a list of their approved schools, and I remember going through and just kind of like clicking on each link, and that can be helpful to just at least get a starting point. That's a good resource if you're coming from abroad.
Kristen Yan, ladies and gentlemen, Kristen Yan, she said it here. Absolutely. Honestly, that's one of the best advice I've heard on the matter. Go to Art Renewal website. That's exactly where I went too. And I looked at everybody's stuff. I looked at School Incaminati, Studio Incaminati. I looked at Grand Central Atelier. I looked at all sorts of ones. And that will really help you. That's where I was directed, and I agree. That's one of the best resources. Do that. Yes. I think we're all concentrating so much tonight. We're not saying much. I'm glad everyone's asking Alex a lot of questions, because it's like giving me a chance to get ahead.
I'll ask another. Eric Nito asks, do you feel highlights are the last item in a work, or should we establish our highest value? I have watched some David LaFell videos where he expresses the idea of establishing the highlight early in a work. What do you think about that?
That's how I was trained as well. A lot of people establishing the highlight. I think it's fun if you're painting for like an audience. It's fun to kind of put it on in the end, because it's kind of like the prestige at the end. You kind of put the thing on there, and the thing kind of comes to life. But as far as helping you establish your range, I think it actually does give you a sense of context that this is going to be the lightest thing in your painting, and it helps you key your painting a little bit better. But I think it's one of those you can choose either schools of thought, and then you just train accordingly. You know, it's kind of like the difference between learning a different kung fu style or something. You know, it's not a right or wrong. It's more of like, if that's more comfortable to you, then go that direction. So.
I feel like in a studio work, I sometimes will put the highlight, like just put little dash of value of what that's going to be to key the painting, but I think with alla prima I save it for some reason. I think that's just how I learned when I took a lot of workshops from alla prima type painters like Susan Lyon and stuff. And that's why I haven't put the highlight in yet, probably.
See, there you go.
And highlight can confuse you with a full light. Yeah? Like that's
I think if it's like a sheen on a person, can confuse you with form light. The highlight itself, I don't know if it does necessarily. I actually think it, in some ways, can your understanding of form, especially on a glassy thing like the eye. But as far as you know, like a sheen or a satiny thing, like skin is very satiny. So like there's moments where a broad area has like this like highlighted sheen. And then those areas, it makes it a bit harder.
Yeah, I feel like a common mistake is when you're learning about form and you're thinking turn from the shadow to the lightest light, a lot of people kind of turn to the highlight. Mm-hmm. And then like turn away from the highlight, and
It's a great point.
messes with you.
It's a really great point. Stay away from the light.
Exactly.
Christopher, who asked about the schools, says, "Thank you so much. Honestly, can't express my gratitude enough for your advice. It means more than I can put into words."
Wow, well, you're so welcome. That's incredible. I mean, that's why we're here. Keep asking questions, my friend. Hopefully we'll be able to give you an answer that feels right for you.
Angelo Di Biasio, I hope I didn't say that wrong, says, "When creating a formal portrait painting, do you take the time to draw the portrait in pencil or charcoal prior to a painting, or do you go straight to drawing with paint as the direct painting method?"
Well, I'm assuming you're asking us what we do, because definitely people out there that do different, like Shane Neal, I know, kind of does a direct painting method and kind of draws as he goes. I draw. I like to have, we always talk about this, and I get this line from our dear friend Carmen Gordon, who's also a lovely painter, but it's the German in me that makes me want to like structuralize things and be in control. And so, I was trained to have a structural drawing underneath and then paint on top. So that being said, yes, I think I find myself drawing everything out. In fact, I even do a study charcoal drawing of the portrait before I do the real one. So, how about you, boss?
Oh yeah, I normally draw first as well.
But as you can tell, while we're doing this today, I'm doing more direct painting style. Seeing if I can expand, always learning, just like everyone, and find new ways of doing the same thing. That's what makes painting fun, and what makes anything enjoyable is that you never stop learning from it. So like, this is a great example of the drawing thing, is that like I'm most often probably would draw everything out. But I use things like painting from life as an excuse to experiment, try stuff that's new. You know, hold my brush in a different way, try different paints, you know. I never used this Naples yellow, and I used it last painting from life, and I liked it, so I was going to use it again. So try something. You might like it, you might not, but you learned something. You learned if you did or didn't. And then in the process, nobody died. Do it again. Try something else. Fail. And Kristen and I talk about this a lot, where we fail forward. You know, you fail understanding and learning, and then you move on because of it.
Tina Figuerelli, hi Tina, says, I appreciate Alex mentioning how he couldn't afford some art schools when trying to learn. I find that really relatable, so it's refreshing to know not many people are willing to discuss that.
Yeah, it was, because, I mean, my parents, like, let me romanticize about the idea, and I went to a interview and everything, and then it's kind of like, okay, so you got in, how are you going to afford to live in New York City as a, what was I, 19 years old, 18 years old? It's like, oh, I can't do that. So I guess I ain't going to this school. But, which I'm kind of happy, because I just would have been a completely different painter.
Good point. Sometimes, like, I'll find myself sitting here and doing like this, when sometimes if you take the time to really pay attention to your mark and just make one, and make the right mark, makes it so much more beautiful. And those are just one of those lessons you got to keep learning over and over again. But did you say her name was Tina? Mm-hmm. Tina, also another good thing to keep in mind is so many times we're taught that we have the lack of resources, when really, honestly, it's the lack of resourcefulness that sometimes gets us into the places that we are. And, you know, I think that, like, when I went to GCA, I got some scholarship. I didn't get a lot. But when we were there, I found out that they needed to move to Long Island City. And they were getting bids from professional moving companies in New York. And I just saw that as an opportunity, and I went in and I talked to the administrator of the school, and I was like, hey, I hear that y'all are wanting to move and y'all are getting bids. I just want to put my name in the hat, as I'll bring a team of guys, put the whole thing together, move the whole school, and I'll put my bid in, and I can guarantee it's going to be lower than what bids you get from other New York moving companies. And I will count it as a barter to tuition. And they took me up on it. And so I had, I would say, 2 years of my tuition paid for because I moved to the school. And so my point there is not that don't go talk to schools about moving them to another location, but that opportunities will present themselves, and you have to just be resourceful mindset, have a resourceful mindset of going, maybe this is an opportunity for me to barter, because people are still very willing to barter on situations. So, and I can tell you story after story of my life where that's just been the case. I've kind of done a yes and. If you go to like an improv class, they say that one of the things you should learn at the beginning is to never say no in improv. You should always just say yes and add to whatever the thing is that the person had said before, because it continues to move the thing across. And I kind of like say I try to take that approach with being resourceful. Or if somebody's like, hey, well, can you do this? Well, yeah. And in fact, I'll do that and this, and try to make it even a more sweeter deal. So now I have yesed myself into corners too, so there's most certainly a pitfall. But I to this day, in hindsight, being that it's 2020, I'd much rather continue to yes myself into corners than to lose opportunity because I wasn't paying attention to how I could be resourceful.
Alex Tibet says, Lewis, that was an incredible life lesson about how you got your tuition paid for. Very inspiring. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, you're welcome.
And then we have a question. What is your opinion on student grade paints? In my country, they're pricey, and the artist grade, like Rembrandt's, cost an enormous amount. Are Winton's fine for training, or Van Gogh's?
I don't know if I'm familiar with Winton. Are you familiar with Winton? I don't know if it's a...
Yeah, I've used Winton a long time ago, and if you're just training, sure, but it definitely is hard. It definitely isn't as good. And I only mostly know that from trying to teach people, and then they have student grade paints, and I can't mix the color, but Winton is definitely decent for training.
Well, everyone, we're going to take a quick break. We will be back in 5, and please keep asking questions, and we'll keep a tab, and we'll go through them. Thank you. All right.
So I just wanted to make a comment on what we talked about before break. Tina says, I really appreciate Alex mentioning, we were talking about that. Thank you all for your answers. I will keep my eyes out for all these opportunities. Hopefully I can find a school to help move as well. Haha.
To always keep in mind, I remember that wasn't the only thing that they even did at GCA. They do all sorts of things called work study. And so one of the people, they needed more easels because they were expanding. And so one of the guys decided, that they already had the saws and all the different things there. And so he's on the weekends he would build easels, and he bartered that for time for tuition. So there's always an opportunity like that, that is just right on the fringes. Sometimes it's just about asking, So one of my favorite stories to tell is when I lived in Oxford, Mississippi, I bartered with my dentist. I didn't have enough for health insurance at the time. And so, especially dental insurance. And so I bartered with my dentist that I would get, as long as I lived in Oxford, Mississippi, I would get a lifetime amount of dental work if I did his portraits of his 3 kids. And so I did portraits of his kids, and we created a contract. And so I got all of my annual checkups and got, fillings and all that kind of stuff for It wasn't free, but as the trade. So, never underestimate the power of a good barter.
All right, and then we have a question from Luke Valencia. Have you guys ever tried 2D animation?
No, when I was a teenager, like a young teenager, you know, tween age, like it was the era of like Aladdin and Lion King and like all these epic Disney films, and all I wanted to be was a Disney animation artist. Little did I know that they were like going through some serious issues at the time, you know, like strikes and things with the artists because they just were being underpaid. But like I just thought that would be the coolest thing. I still think that there's like, I love the storytelling that animation allows you to do. And so for that, I love, you know. But these days, I don't have the time anymore. And I chose a different path. But it looks super fun. But just like anything, I think it can be a job.
All right, and then Calvin Van Leeuwen, I'm sorry, Calvin, asks, how clear is your vision of what you want your painting to look like before you start? Do you have a vague idea and then just trust the process to take you to finish? Or do you know exactly where you're going at every step?
I feel like it's somewhere in the middle of that.
Yeah, I would say the same.
It's like you kind of have a vision, you kind of have your idea, but then you're open for things to kind of surprise you.
Yep.
Try new things. But I have, you know, heard people like Richard Schmidt and Jeremy Lipking and stuff where they'll talk about how they kind of have what they're looking at painted in their style, like in their head. And they know what the painting's going to look like before they're going to paint it. And like with Richard Schmidt, I totally believe that that's true. Because he has such a distinct style. I think he can probably look at everything and imagine how he would translate it in his brushwork.
I think placement I do. I wouldn't say I'm even the best with like composition. You know, I'd say my trick is likeness typically. But the aesthetic of design, I still, especially with alla prima, because I'm not an alla prima painter, like as a profession really, I do it for the practice and enjoyment. But it, you know, it most certainly is a skill set of, an extra skill set to know, for sure.
All right, Christopher asks, what are good affordable brushes to get on the market, from fine detail brushes to the standard size brushes?
Did you say good horrible ones?
Affordable.
Oh, I thought you said good horrible brushes. I was like, well, boy, kind of backed me into a corner on that one, huh? I would say, you know, affordable, if you're going to any conference, which that costs a lot of money too, but like you can pick up Rosemary brushes for a lot cheaper, and they're high quality brushes. But Princeton is one that I've found just like Jerry's. And they make a kind of a mongoose faux hair that I think really works great. So that I'd suggest Princeton. I think Silverbrush makes it good. You know, just go towards more synthetic and just a high quality synthetic, and you're going to get close to what feels like good brushes without feeling like you're spending a fortune to have them. All right, let's see if I can work on some of the form on this guy, this portrait. This is the stage I'm just trying to get like larger shapes to feel right.
All right, Moena asks, when do I start thinking about plane changes?
Wow. I think you always think about it from the very beginning, but you just think about larger plane changes from the beginning and work your way downward on the plane changes as you work. That would be, like for example, right now I'm working on this side plane, and then the frontal bone starts right here. And so like I'm working on making sure that this plane as a larger shape is coinciding with the structure of her face. And then turning the form around that. And then when I'm turning the form around that, I'm thinking about the plane changes that are more subtle as I go around her forehead into the light. And so that's where I'm thinking about more. You just go to smaller and smaller plane changes once you've gotten like the large plane changes figured out. Alex, you have any thoughts on that one?
No, that's much better than my answer. I was just going to say all the time. But that's what I mean. All the time, but yeah, the big planes and then all the little small ones.
All right. Marco Fontalon says, regards from Trieste, Italy. For a large painting, do you often do small thumbnail sketches?
Triste? Like sad? That's interesting. Tell me, Marco, if, by the way, piacere. I love Italy. Triste, does that mean you live in sad Italy? But what was, ask me the question one more time? Trieste, okay.
For a large painting, do you often do small thumbnail sketches?
Yes, I do. I do thumbnail color studies when I'm working with large paintings. And I actually think they're very helpful because you can have the color run away with you when it's larger. So, need it closer? You got it?
With that being said, do you have any tips for studying compositions? Sam asks.
Well, I think a great resource for studying good composition is probably Gurney's, I'm trying to draw on a blank, James Gurney? James Gurney's blog website called Gurney Journey. He's got so much information on composition and resource with that as you're studying with like anything from small studies He is a wealth of knowledge. You know, he mainly works in the illustration world, but he does fine art as well. And so it definitely bridges the gap of both industries. So look him up. That would be, I feel like, just a great resource for you to have, because there's a million little rabbit holes. He's been working on his blog, man, before blogs were even known as a thing. I mean, he's been doing it for probably 20 years. So great resource. You got to check it out.
Yeah, I want to know, like, I have the same question. Like, I want to know how I can get better at composition. And so I try and, like, answer that myself. Like, I took just a bunch of paintings that I really like, and then I brought them in Photoshop and made them, like, black and white, and then tried to posterize them to just see the really simple, like, just shapes of the composition and, like, act like I know what I'm looking at, to try and understand the secret of what's going on. But I know that there is, like, James Gurney, and I know that other people, a lot of illustrators, I feel like, really study composition,
Yeah,
really well.
definitely.
All right, and then we have a question for Alex. Are you purposely compressing the values before you punch in some darks?
Well, yes. Yeah, I tend to kind of compress everything in, like, this middle range, and then punch in some darks, and then punch in, like, some highlights. I'm not sure how I came about, like, doing it like that, but I end up kind of ending up more compressed than reality sometimes when I do it, and sometimes I just think that has a nice, pretty look to it. I also think it's like what artists like, we were just talking about him because it's his birthday, but Odd Nerdrum.
Happy birthday, Odd.
Yeah, happy birthday, Odd. He'll, like, sand his paintings. And I feel like when he's sanding his paintings, it's kind of compressing everything, and then he can go in and add, like, a dark accent and a light accent and, like, kind of carve into this thing that's now been kind of generalized. And so it has a, nice look than to go straight into all of the values. But it's like, I guess I'm just trying to see. It's almost like when I'm looking at the model, I'm trying to see, like, the tone underneath all of the highlights and underneath the shadows, and just that general tone.
It's a great way to put it.
And then Tina asks, can we discuss framing as well? Tips on finding good frames, and how do you choose a frame?
We use several. I mean, I'm always on the lookout for another great framer. You know, there's some really great custom framers out there. I'll tell you who I've used in the past, and will continue to, we give business to. But Rhett Ashby is one that Alex discovered that I kind of piggyback onto, who used to work for Masterworks Frame, and I also use Masterworks Frame as well. Both of them are out of Utah, I believe, is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
And they have affordable frames. But always make sure that you get your order in way in advance of when you need it, because they make them by hand, and so they get backed up sometimes during busy seasons, especially holiday seasons and things like that. So, but I would say they're really great. As far as picking out frames, I still feel like I even struggle with, it's kind of like it when you see it, you put the painting in it, and so I'll typically go to frame shops around here locally, and I'll try frame samples until I feel like I see something that seems to harmonize with the painting. And, because sometimes I'll be like, oh, a white gold frame might look really good on that. And then I put it on there, I'm like, nope, that doesn't look good at all. And then there'll be times where I'm like, a darker frame with like a little fillet might be really nice. Or this width might be really nice. And then you put it on there and you're like, okay, that doesn't work. And then you put something else on there and all of a sudden it just feels right. So, that's one of my suggestions as far as that's concerned.
I found I've tried this little hack where on my Instagram I'll type in frames, and then usually what pops up are people that all the artists I follow as well. So it kind of gives me a hint, oh, okay, that this should be a good frame person because all of my favorite artists are following this person. And so I just go through the list of people that pop up when I type in frame. And that's been kind of fun to discover, framers that aren't very well known yet, but, some local artists know and that kind of thing.
Good tip, Kristen. We're going to make this just this is almost becoming like a good radio show, and then you always have sort of the host person who's kind of navigating everything. Kristen in the background, ladies and gentlemen. I will say, our sweet, lovely Divya and her fabulous Australian accent also adds a lot to the enrichment of this podcast of Painting from Life. She is sweetly hanging out in the backgrounds with us this evening because we're all taking turns. But as always, Divya Melaleuca, ladies and gentlemen. The one and only. Turn your head just ever so slightly that direction. Yep, that's plenty. Totally right to you?
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, start thinking about if I were Susan Lyon, how would I paint this part right now?
Well, that's interesting as a segue to our next question. If you could simplify your portrait painting process down, what would the stages be?
Ooh. Well, I think it depends on if we're talking about my commission portrait world or if we're talking about this alla prima style. I think, because if I broke down my commission portraits, we go back to what I said earlier, a drawing color study first, blocking in stage. And in that, you're going largest shapes to smaller shapes, because that's going to help save you time. Then the other part of that is if I'm painting like this, I think the biggest thing is the same with alla prima, is the larger shapes to smaller shapes. But then you're thinking about color, and I do sort of layers of value and color, where I'm thinking more about value, and then I'm thinking more about color, like hue and chroma afterwards. And it's sort of a dance of that, and then like after I'm thinking about mark making and edges is kind of like the final stage of what I'm thinking about. So now I wouldn't say that's necessarily the best approach. It's most certainly just my approach.
And if I was to simplify mine down, it would be, it's like the drawing, and then there's, after the drawing, then there's the underpainting, which is kind of like an alla prima, sort of sketchy, kind of like this on top of the drawing, trying to keep the drawing. And then kind of like another layer on top of that, just kind of getting smaller and like more into the shapes and trying to kind of sculpt it smaller. And then another layer on top of that where you sculpt even smaller shapes until it kind of all weaves together. So if I already had, it would basically be if I already had this perfectly drawn out on here, and then I did kind of this on top of it, brought it a bit further, and then I would let that dry and then go on top of this with just smaller shapes, and then I'd be thinking more about form in like the later stages, whereas the first stage is a bit more alla prima and kind of flat.
Cool. Sally Thompson says, hi from Australia. Great to see you painting in real time. And then Edsel says, good morning from Philippines. I just want to ask, what are the significance of complementary colors in painting?
Ooh, that's a great question, Alex. You keep answering the question so I can paint.
Yeah, I'm like not painting as I'm answering the question.
That's my goal tonight, is just keep Alex busy answering questions.
Lovely. Well,
No, I'm just kidding.
If my painting isn't good, I blame that.
There you go. See, then you have something to blame it on.
Yeah. Well, I was talking about that. I brought it up the other day with Kristen, and I think with Caroline as well, about, especially when you're painting, like, because I brought it up in reference to painting a background that's kind of like a flat color, and a lot of times when there's like a cool color in the background, like let's say a cold colored wall, or kind of a cold gray, a lot of people end up making it look very matte, and it looks kind of chalky, and it's just this solid cold. And really, to like make most things work and balance color is bringing in the complementary colors within, and like weaving in like warm and cool and like complementary colors. It's really like, a lot of times I'm looking at my painting and I'm not even looking at what I'm painting, I'm just thinking, how do I fix the color? Like, where does the color look bad? And usually the answer is to add more of the complementary color.
Yeah.
And it ends up balancing it and fixing the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's probably one of the single most common issues when I'm teaching a workshop, is seeing people have a struggle with balancing warm and cool colors. And part of understanding warm and cool is really more of understanding a complement of a color, and how do you achieve, both of them harmonizing with each other, because it's kind of like musical notes. And it's very important to make sure that those musical notes are all making a chord that sounds like they go together versus it sounding slightly off. If you have like one note that's too sharp in your chord, then the whole chord sounds off. And so there's this like dance and understanding that you have to go through to figure out what ways to solve that. And part of how to do that is to think about the complements of each of those colors. And that helps you create neutralizing effects. So, I mean, this is obviously a conversation that is very in depth. You can unpackage and keep talking about over and over again, that deeper and deeper, you know. But at its basic level, the complement of each color helps the harmony of that color. So,
yeah, it's kind of like if on my Instagram website, I did a painting of Divya where she's wearing this red, like, bandana thing. And I remember when I painted it, like, I first blocked it in with just all reds. And it just looked like this glowing red eyesore. And in order to make it look natural, in all the halftones and stuff, I had to put, like, all of these neutral greens in there. And it's not even necessarily what I was seeing, but I just know how the paint works and what colors look good together and stuff, and I just had to fix it that way.
yeah, see, that's awesome. There's so many times that color can deceive you too. So it's the knowledge that can get you to that place, because your eye can't tell what you're supposed to do. And in fact, you'll struggle to even want to change it for fear that it's the wrong move, but your training is telling you that's the right move, that's the thing you have to do. And then you do it, and then you're like, oh my gosh, that helps so much. And sometimes it's so far off that like you'll put the complement or like shift it a little bit, and even that looks like crazy because there's not enough of that color to help harmonize with the whole thing. You know, like one of my students one time, you know, I used transparent oxide red a lot and ultramarine blue, but they had used so much oxide red out of balance with the blue that I was trying to re-neutralize her portrait. And at first it just looked like any mark I'd make looked like this extreme blue on the thing, and it looked horrible. But then like as we added to it, we found that it actually was coming to life and looked normal, because at first we were like, this looks so orange, you know. Good question.
We have another one. Jesse Willicook says, I've always considered blending to be a dirty word and just mix each transition stroke by stroke. Do you guys blend at all? Is this in this alla prima context?
Well, I definitely think that you can achieve a fresh painting by making each stroke an intentional stroke. I do think that creating this idea of form is an action where I'm trying to keep it fresh. I'm definitely having to force myself to continue to think about every stroke, you know. But you know, Scott Burdick does such an incredible job watching him paint, where he just goes in and I mean every mark is this brand new fresh mark. And so yes, I definitely think that if you're wanting to achieve freshness, it is a way to do that. But if you know how to blend really well, then it can work in your favor. And I mean, Scott Waddell is a good example of knowing like how to create form, and he'll blend all of his areas together to create like this like seamless form. So, and it's really kind of more about what kind of painting you're trying to achieve. But there's no doubt about it that one form of freshness can be achieved by knowing how to just put one mark down and leave it. And that's a whole nother practice of discipline for sure.
Yeah, I feel like it's so funny because I mean, when I like taking workshops, it was a lot of kind of alla prima type people, and obviously like they're good at teaching workshops because they can do the thing really quickly. But they always try and like scare you about blending, that it's the bad guy. But there's ways to blend with a good amount of paint on your brush, a good amount of paint on the canvas, and blending in a way that's fresh, that you can create this nice form, blending, and it still look super fresh. I mean, I look at some of the Sargents and stuff, and it's like we see all those big juicy brush strokes on top or like the ridges, but there's so much like nuance of like turning form and color shifts. Like that was a lot more brush strokes than you think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he makes it, and he would scrape off, and that's another thing some people would do too, is like, if it just got too much, they would just scrape all of that off, but it leaves this remnant behind that then you can blend into, but it still feel fresh too. Now I've not done that, but I've seen it done, and I'm like, wow, that looks really stinking awesome, you know.
And then Ben Valentine asks, Lewis, when you do a commission, do you only take local clients, or do you travel to get material and reference to work from?
Good question. I definitely travel. During COVID, it's been interesting because it's most certainly stunted my travel. And so, but what ways around it is I've had photographers help get me the reference images, and we've done sort of like these like zoomy type situations where we'll zoom and they'll send pictures live through. You can use apps with your Wi-Fi on your cameras now, and I'll just watch them take the shots, and I'll direct them accordingly. And so we actually did that in Chicago recently with one of my clients, and I did some charcoals. But no, typically I like to fly to the place and do like a live sitting, which like Dallas is a great example. I went to Dallas several times and did just that. And that was really a great experience. I did that a couple of times. So, like a client in Massachusetts, I'll be going probably to see not too long from now. So yeah, definitely like to go on location, but it gives me an excuse to travel, and I enjoy traveling when I get a chance to, because we're kind of like cabin fevered into this place a lot, so that helps as well. It's a great question. There are no bad questions, by the way. I might have a really bad, corny answer, but I'll keep firing away. So
all right.
One of the things I would like to say is if you see me like going up and down like this, often that isn't even me blending in some of these situations. It's me fixing the drawing. Because we're doing this alla prima style. So it requires me to continue to fix the drawing until I've got it right. All right, keep going, sorry.
Ben says thank you. And then our fabulous friend Nicholas Thorpe asks, do y'all listen to anything while working? Do different genres of music affect how you paint?
Nicholas. That's a great question. It depends on what I'm working on. There are areas where I feel like I need deep concentration, and so I won't listen to anything because it almost can be more distracting. But on the regular, I love listening to podcasts, and I'll listen to non-lyrical music a lot. I have found that lyrical music, sometimes I just want to sing along, and that's annoying to everybody that I paint around, as well as distracts me from actually working on the painting. So now Nick has been here at East Oaks and worked with us, and he is quite a talented guy. He artist. He is right now teaching somewhere here in Raleigh, and he is what we would call part of the East Oaks family. Can't wait to have him back. I think he'll be hanging out with us this summer. So we're really looking forward to seeing him. We miss you, buddy. Alex, what do you listen to, bud?
For me, it just completely depends on my mood, how much my coffee is affecting me. If the coffee is affecting me positively or negatively. Because sometimes you get surprised, you don't know. But yeah,
I hear you.
lots of stuff. I can't listen to podcasts though, because I listen to like educational stuff that I really want to remember. And so it just takes me away from the painting.
That reminds me, when I was at GCA, I started to listen, because I'm the same way. I listen to a lot of sort of educational programs, Radio Lab type style programs. And I decided that I wanted to get like more deeply versed in philosophy. And so I started listening to this philosophy podcast called The Partially Examined Mind. And it was so deep. And like, you just dive straight into the deep end. And I found myself like sitting down in a chair, staring at my drawing instead of even painting,
exactly.
trying to think about the whole thing that they were going. And I was like, you know what? I can't do this. I cannot listen to this kind of a podcast and paint. It's just going to be impossible. So I had to take it off my list. So. But Nick plays a mean banjo, and I gotta have him just in the background playing for us the whole time, and I'd be happy.
That is time.
All right, we'll be back in just a little bit, everyone. Bonus session, since we delayed it for about 15 minutes. We're going to do one extra session after this one. So, and Samantha was gracious enough to allow us to have that extra session. So thank you so much. We'll take what we can get.
So a question from Tina Fagarelli. I've been using titanium white for years, but I hear a lot about flake white and other types of white options. Any recommendations on these?
Well, titanium white's a great white if you want something to be very bright and cool. It does a great job of cooling as well. So I think it definitely will suffice. The only thing, if you paint really fine or do like really like subtle form, the only thing with titanium white is in its second layer, if you're going to layer with it, it does a thing called flashing, which is it can dry darker than what it looks like when you apply it. So that would be just a pitfall to be aware of when you're painting with flake white. I mean titanium white. Now, lead white, the reason I paint with lead white is because it helps prevent that type of flashing to happen. So that would be the only thing, is just keep a lookout for that.
And the lead white that we believe we both use is from Natural Pigments. And they have a lead white #1 and a lead white #2. And I believe the #2 is like brighter and more white, where the #1 is kind of like a traditional lead where it's a little bit darker and warmer.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I love lead white.
Yes, lead white, I just like the way it applies. I like its effects. So it's my paint of choice. I will say that it's not for everyone. Obviously, you've got to make sure you're washing your hands when you're finished. It certainly has lead in it. So keep those kinds of things in mind. But the longevity that it gives your painting is the most stable of all the pigments out there. So meaning that it will make all of your colors have a longer lifespan in your painting, and they'll have a less tendency to crack. And that's one of the other major reasons why I love lead white so much. So just keep that in mind. But I used titanium white for years. And in some instances, it's still great. You can still get it brighter. It's not and cooler than lead white. So if you're wanting to like put some crazy highlight in something for some reason, like that's your guy or your girl. Good question.
So Calvin asks, Alex, last time you said you were experimenting with a fan brush. I see that you're still using it. What do you like using the fan brush for, and what have you learned since you started using it?
Yeah, I've been using it a lot. For me, it just has this nice quality. It grabs a lot of paint, and you're able to kind of paint into it almost like blends for you, like do a brush mark and it kind of works its way into the other one. And I just feel more like a sculptor with it. Like if I grab enough paint, I feel like I can just mold it around better. And it has versatility of making a really big shape, or you go on the side and you can make a really small shape with it. So
It also makes interesting marks,
yeah.
which is kind of a nice feature.
Angela asks, if you do a commission work on stretched linen, how do you plan for the loosening that will occur over time to make sure your painting doesn't sag?
That's a really good question. Believe it or not, that's one of the main reasons that I use panel now for all of my paintings. It's just because canvas is fun to paint on, but it is truly one of the less desirable surfaces to paint on for the purpose of creating longevity, and it's because of the sagging. It's very possible to re-stretch it, and it, I mean, that's what conservators do a lot, is have to re-stretch the canvas. There's keys in the canvas, and there's all sorts of different types of frames that try to compensate for this issue, and one of them, they'll have cranks on the back for like really expensive framing brackets for canvas, but it is inevitable that over time it will falter on you. So just keep in mind that there's a lot of things that help create efforts to do to prevent it, but it will happen. Now saying that is, yeah, you can get all sorts of like expensive brackets, but those keys that go into the corners, you can keep knocking those for a little bit and it keeps continuing to stretch your canvas for you. Alex, you've done a bit of canvas stretching. Have you learned anything in the process of your research that would help
No.
said situation?
I need to do more research before I let those paintings out into the world.
But, one of the things that Georgia Hanlon, who is the owner and founder of Rublev, would say is one thing you can do is stretch or adhere the canvas to oh good grief, I'm losing my train of thought because I'm trying to paint. You adhere it to panel. And so that could be very helpful as well. So you can adhere it. They have like an adhesive PVA glue, and that what that does is reduces the amount of exposure to humidity, because what makes the canvas get loose is humidity stretching, expanding and contracting the linen over time. And cotton's worse. So like, so if you are going to use a canvas, linen would be the best route to go because it's less susceptible to humidity changes, because once you wet linen, it does one big shrink, and then that shrink helps it stabilize. Philosophers, chemists, scientists, and this is a great example of where these are things we've had to learn scientifically of how to make sure that what we're doing, is chemically going to work. So that's a good question.
Mr. Poison T asks, what 3 books do you most value in your learning, excluding artist biographies?
Well, the two, let me think. There's 2 off the top of my head that I reference a lot and that help me a lot, which is the oil painting manual, whatever the title is, by Solomon J. Solomon, and then the Everything I Know About Painting by Richard Schmid. Definitely those 2 books.
Yeah. Those are really great books. I'd say the same for me. There's a lot of fantastic books out there. Believe it or not, most of my resources have come more from blogs, websites, counsel from individuals, way more so than books have. But the references of those books that he said most certainly have been ones I have used. Not Solomon J. Solomon. I actually have, since Alex has talked about it so much, and believe it or not, James Gurney talks about it quite a bit. I've actually wanted to read it. I have yet to read it.
Another question from Alex Tabet. Since Alex has a show soon, is there any chance he'll do another figure workshop for Atelier Live like he did of Divya before his first solo show? No worries if not. You guys have spoiled me. Haha.
After the show happens and I have much more time, I'd love to do another video, but not until after.
I will say Alex works really hard when he's getting ready for his show. He is dawn till dusk. I see him every day come up like clockwork. And he comes up and starts and just cranks all the way away. He has everything scheduled out perfectly. So, but yes, we're excited about doing something with him as soon as he's available to, for sure. That's good. So, as always, everyone, y'all do have such great questions, and we just deeply appreciate them. It inspires us to keep doing this.
Alex says, totally understandable. Can't wait to see all your new works for your show. Congratulations, so well deserved.
Name too, huh?
Yeah, good name. Good name. Yeah, I'm excited because I've been working on this. I had more time on this show, kind of, than I did on the last one. So I've been hiding paintings for just way too long. I'm so ready to
show all the paintings.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're ready for you to too. I'm fortunate that I get to see them start to finish, but I'm excited for him. It's going to be just such a fabulous, fabulous show.
Mr. Poison Tea asks, how do you choose colors for a piece? Do you try to stick to one palette with cool and warms, or do you open palette depending on a piece? Not sure what that means, but yeah. How do you choose colors for a piece? Do you try to stick to one palette with cool or warms?
I think I understand the question. Like, most of the time, all of my paintings are done with the same palette. If you are referencing like the literal colors you're putting down on your palette. But there has been times where I've like limited my palette for certain paintings because I've just wanted to try and get a more kind of like I did a self-portrait for the show. My idea was that I wanted it to be kind of sepia toned, like in a way. So I took out like all my blues and just had all these kind of just like a pale yellow and a red and like a gray. So there is times, but mostly it's all the same palette.
question from Alex Tabet. How would you recommend storing your completed panel paintings when you have extremely limited space? Is it okay to stack them flat on top of each other with perhaps wax paper in between each?
I highly recommend not using wax paper because wax paper is it's heat sensitive, and I have made that mistake. But it was with a drawing. I thought it was similar to glassine paper, and I put it, sandwiched it in between, left it in a hot car, and it melted all over my drawings, portraits for clients. And I learned that lesson the hard way. So definitely don't use wax paper. What I would also say is I would not store my paintings stacked on top of each other if they were important to you. I would separate them and put them like on their side and then have some sort of separator if you have that ability to do that. If you don't, then I typically will just lean them up against the wall, and I put the smallest up against the wall first, and then a taller one and a taller one and a taller one where they're all still separated from each other.
Yeah.
So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, best to not like lay it flat on like a floor stacked onto each other. I mean, unless they're just super dry. But
Or if you don't care about them.
yeah,
But I'm assuming if he's asking the question, he cares about them. So yeah. But I know some people store them. Glassine paper is what you need if you're wanting to do some sort of like wax type situation like you're talking. So keep that in mind, that could help. Glassine paper you can find, it's an architect paper, and it just doesn't rub, it doesn't melt, it doesn't do anything, but it just resists everything. So you can put a charcoal painting in there or something else and it'd just be fine. So yeah, that's definitely what I would recommend.
Well, Alex Tabet says, "Holy crap! Oh, glad I learned the wax paper lesson the easy way. Thanks, Lewis."
You're welcome.
Mr. Poison Tea says, in regards to his palette question before, by open palette he meant adding color. For example, using Zorn's palette with the addition of alizarin.
Well, yeah, let's say like when I'm painting an outdoor figure or something, there's sometimes specific greens or yellows that I'll need to add to be able to get those colors. So like for very specific situations where the color kind of goes out of the normal color range, then I'll kind of add something new in. Or take something out completely, just because like a lot of my high chroma yellows, sometimes I can just look at what I'm about to paint and think I can just completely take that out, because if I don't take it out.
A question from Alex Tabet. Sometimes I shoot a model and create a background in the painting out of my imagination using references for guidance. Any tips for achieving color, value, harmony, depth when it's not directly observed?
Well, I mean, there's definitely a lot of things you can do to help that. I mean, like this is a good example. I can look at her skin tone and I can say, okay, well, what do I need to do to the background to help harmonize it? If I went too green, the amount of like orange that I've put in her face would then make her like scream to orange. So I need to add warmth to it in order for it to look balanced. The other thing you can also do to backgrounds is mix two colors that will achieve the same color that one color would, but mixing the two sort of complementary colors, and then when you push it in, it creates like warm and cool effects depending on if it's opaque or transparent in a spot, sort of scumble effect that Alex talks about. And so that can help as well. So if I'm mixing like violet with this French ultramarine, and then I'm adding a little bit of umber to it and a little bit of white, I'm like achieving a particular type of like neutral greenish color, but it has a little bit of warmth in it too. And it seems to like be very effective with her, like her skin tone. So you can just kind of push it around and creates that kind of effect. Good question. Alex, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I don't think so. I mean, mainly like what we talked about was just like complementary colors and like color balancing. I'm just thinking about that a lot when I'm like making up stuff. Just really stepping back and seeing how everything relates.
Yeah, I actually think that backgrounds kind of can matter quite a bit because they can, you know, make the painting look like it's out of context or in context based on its color. So, but best way to do it is practice and experiment, you know, and you know what a lot of people do to try to achieve color harmony is like, say that you have 3 colors. Even if it's like 2 of the colors that you need to only like make the color that's out there, always add a tiny bit of the 3rd color into it, and that helps kind of harmonize because it pulls you to where there's not such a separation of color that it doesn't feel like it's in the same environment. So for example, if I'm mixing, you know, red and blue together to be very basic, and I'm like, you know, I'm using French ultramarine, or let's say cobalt blue and French ultramarine and alizarin crimson. If I'm mixing those 2 colors in here, if I add my yellow, which say it's oxide yellow, and I just put a touch of it in there, it's going to shift it enough to where it might harmonize better with your painting.
Mark Nussbaum says, did either of you decide to almost pursue a different genre of subjects to carve out your niche in painting? Examples are, i.e. other than portrait work.
So what he's basically asking is are we trying to identify ourselves as a particular artist based off of our subject matter? Is what I'm kind of gathering from that.
Did either of you decide to almost pursue a different genre of subjects to carve out? Yeah, to carve out your niche in painting other than portrait work.
Like other than people?
Well, I will say I got kind of like the seascape bug. I really, really enjoy trying to paint the effect of water. So yeah, I definitely had a kick, and I still love doing it. It's just I've carved too much portrait time out at the moment. But no, I think if I found time, I still would enjoy being in the seascape world. So that's definitely a kind of a world that I find fascinating still, if I wasn't a portrait painter. I mean, I would hopefully, my hope is to not be considered as much of a portrait painter as a figurative painter, but I think that what you're intending to mean is one and the same, because that would be my full hope.
And before I was a figure painter, I kind of felt like I was more of a still life painter. And felt like that was my niche, but I wanted to change it, so I changed it to figurative. So,
Alex Tibet says, awesome, Lewis. Thank you so much. You rock.
You rock.
you rock.
It's always like a race to the end. You feel like, you're like, I have only a limited amount of time left. What am I going to do?
9 minutes. No pressure. Don't mess up.
Ah!
Christopher Barakla says, unbelievable paintings. Been such a great session. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us and commenting. We truly appreciate you. Makes it worth doing.
Alex Tabet says, hi, Alex. Any chance you could talk a little about how you got with Arcadia? Obviously, you're insanely talented.
Yes. One, I didn't do anything. I just painted, and then they contacted me. And that's how I kind of live by, is just, I live by this. Or when I was like trying to, at the beginning it was just like, if the work is really good, they can't ignore you.
Yep.
So I didn't really try with the galleries. I was actually planning on contacting Arcadia like years later than they actually contacted me. But yeah, if the work's good enough, then that's what it is.
See if I can. What we got? 7 minutes now. Counting it down.
1 minute.
Yeah. I'm gonna see if I can pull some of this hairline down here.
Vimala says, you both are doing a great job. Thanks for doing this demo.
Thank you for joining in. As we race to the finish here. We're so quiet. We're like the whirs of our brushes. Let's see if I can go into these.
Alex Tabat says, Lewis, just want to say that your commentary in Divya's portrait workshop about specular reflection and simultaneous contrast were earth-shattering for me. High praise.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate you saying that. You know, I will say that it was earth-shattering for me too when I discovered and understood more of what that world was about, and so it excites me when I get excited about seeing something new, and you know, so glad that it has excited you as much as it did me. Thank you.
Two minutes left.
2 minutes.
Alex, what were you doing when you had your fan brush up in the air?
I was comparing a vertical with, I was just comparing a shape to another shape where they lined up vertically.
Mazen Gurble says, I'm acting like I'm with you. I will take away the brushes as you stop. Even I have unlimited time reference of the model. It's a learning of when we should stop as well.
That's a great practice.
Yeah, learning when to stop.
timer is great for me because I have such a hard time learning when to stop. So I think that's a wise thing to do. What's our time?
10 seconds.
Hold on there, Samantha.
All right, that's time.
All right, everybody say thank you to Samantha. You're wonderful. Wow, what a great model. So it's been wonderful. Everybody, thank you all so much for tuning in. I will, wait, where's my camera? Here, I'll put this one on. Put this one on for half a second. Switch it over. All right, can everybody see me better? Thank you all so much for joining. Just a few announcements. At the end of the month, we will be releasing Mackenzie Swenson's video. She will be doing how to paint the figure. And she is just going to be a wealth of knowledge. She just is so talented and is such a great teacher. Explains every brushstroke that she's doing. Looking really forward to having that out. And we're also going to be doing an interview with her. Let's see, I believe it'll be on our Facebook and our YouTube. It'll be next week. I think it's Wednesday of next week. So tune in for that. It'll be at noon. And just keep in mind, if for some reason you're missing any of these announcements, if you click the little bell and you click subscribe, it will inform you of when we will be doing those things. And you can check on our website. We post them in advance so that people can see when we're doing it. Also, if you want to get reference images for this and you've never done it before, make sure there's a link in the details for you to get that reference images. You submit your email and you'll have reference images to all of the Painting from Life we've done in the past. So until next time, we'll be doing this again next month. We really appreciate y'all. Thank you for joining East Oaks and East Oaks family. Have a good night.